Oh, excuse me.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home of flatulence on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew, and I am joining you from the Underworld North studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I'm joined across the continent, across the border, across the continent by your friend of mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week? You got everything out of your system, all right?
I got everything out of my system. I had a big lunch. But yeah, I'm doing good. It's daylight savings time, so it's dark in here. So
That's true.
that's what you gotta do. Windy day, but otherwise doing pretty good. Doing
Uh,
pretty good.
I'm not gonna let that down ever. That was great. I don't know if anyone heard that on stream, but that was nice and hilarious. All right, this week we're back to talking about that Space Wizard show. Finally, as promised, now the actors have a deal that most of them
Old
can live with.
old choice of naming that Space Wizard show, right?
That
Like
Space Wizard show, the
old
first
choice.
Space Wizard show we've gotten on Disney Plus.
No.
About a Space Wizard so far, as far as we know. I mean, there's the Grogu Space Wizard, but Ahsoka is the Space Wizard. And so now the actors have a deal that most of them, I think, hopefully can live with. We can finally talk about Ahsoka and why it's the best thing since sliced meiloorun. We are coming back to the podcast chariot as we often do when the show is finished. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Cannon Pod, DYEONCANONPOD. Here on the Underworld YouTube channel, we got YouTube memberships, we got super chats in the Underworld network, we've got Discord, the Discord chat. Put your comments in there, chat it up, tag us, do what you want. We will say hi. Joel definitely say hi. Joel, talk about any events going on.
No events this week. We're taking the week off for the Thanksgiving American holiday. So you are free to go and do what you wish. But yeah, we thought, people are gonna probably be busy this week, so it's like, we'll take the week off and come back the week after next, hopefully.
That's right, Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving. I had Thanksgiving in New York. I was in America for Canadian Thanksgiving. Yeah. So for those of you on the south of the border, have a wonderful Thanksgiving time with family. Speaking of Thanksgiving, tractor beam this past week didn't happen because I had a thing for work all day. But this week, Chris Abbott usually Chris Abbott and I do the comics come in Wednesday. We review them Thursday at 12:15 Eastern, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. I'm gonna keep doing that. Chris is gonna take the week off, but I'm gonna fly solo and see what happens. Hopefully that turns out some good content. I'll probably end up figuring something out with the comic book covers and ways to break up the visuals and things like that. That'll make for a decent solo podcast, I hope. We'll see. One way to find out. You never know. But yeah, so that'll be this Thursday at 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. Grab your lunch, grab your breakfast, grab your comics. We're talking about a whole bevy of comics. So I'm gonna be just going by myself, and you're gonna have 5 or 6 stories to catch up on from last week. So including that Wild Visions comic. So Ion Visions, which is a whole other pocket of storytelling. All right, we can move right along. This week in Star Wars, what are your thoughts, Joel?
Week in Star Wars, woohoo! Well, I kind of have like one mini thing, one thought. The mini thing is I started Eye of Darkness. It's pretty good.
Yes.
I'm quite enjoying it. So that's been fun. Probably lots to talk about in the future there. So I've been thinking a lot about, as with Ahsoka and all this stuff coming, and it's like, as we keep moving away from, if we keep doing more and more Star Wars, like when do terms like originalist and prequelist and even sequelist just start to become outdated? Like, we think we've moved past that at this point. Like, Star Wars just is going to keep evolving and evolving into what I don't know. It's like, well, you don't have prequelist if you have originalist, so originalist has to evolve into prequelist, and then prequelist has to evolve into sequelist, and then what does it evolve to afterwards? Expanded universes?
The asterisk. No,
asterisk.
The asterisk.
The asterisk. Asterisk. Exactly. Lots of isses.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, Star Wars is, George sold it. That's what sort of nailed number one in terms of like any sort of defining trait of Star Wars because it wasn't it's going to be 1 through 6 and maybe his little Clone Wars show that was going
Mhm.
on at the time. It's like, nope, now we're going to make more movies. We're going to recontextualize things. We're going to make Disney Plus shows. Although they even probably did have Disney Plus shows at the time, but that was a different story.
Sure.
More new books, High Republic, all that stuff, and it's like, some of these terms are starting to get a little outdated. Unless you just want to be like, Lucas's, which is just 1 through 6, which I get it. There are people out there who are very much.
Yeah. He
Um,
he
so
sold the franchise. We can't do that. It's canon. Disney's shows are canon. Anyway, sorry, keep going.
yeah, so it's like, eventually it's like, prequelist, originalist, sequelist, sagaist. It's like I feel like we've moved past that, especially because like there's no more saga unless they ever do decide to do a 10 through 12. But now it's just
Mhm.
going to be stories in the universe. So yeah, that's just my thoughts of like, are these terms becoming outdated? Have they been outdated for a while? That
Yeah, it's funny. I saw the notes, and I didn't intentionally wear this shirt just despite the notes, but because I entirely forgot.
nice.
But yeah, I mean, this shirt it is a vestige. I'm not going to go tarps off on YouTube. Don't worry, don't worry, people. It is a bit of a vestige of this fight that we had in Star Wars fandom for the last, I don't know, 15, 20 years, to say, and in this generational gap and this all these different things about saying, yeah, the episodes 1 to 3 are our main story. They're brilliant, beautiful stories with beautiful production design and music, and for the most part beautiful performances, and uh completely change so much of what Star Wars is. And so, not change, heavily influenced what Star Wars is. The argument's been made. We won the argument. And
Did you
nobody,
though? I mean, did you?
well, in that nobody disputes. Well, I should say this: it isn't a fight anymore.
That's true.
It isn't. Well, first of all, it's certainly there's no gatekeeping or anything like that. Either way, right?
Right.
I'm gonna, at the risk of kind of gatekeeping, it's like, yeah, we kind of did win the argument. We did say there isn't any sort of not my Star Wars about the prequels anymore. Um, the problem is, and this is why I'm all, yeah, Joel, like, wear that sequelist shirt, because all Star Wars is good Star Wars. Even the things I don't think are great are still good. It's still Star Wars, and and it also
Hmm.
the general theme of loving what you love and enjoying what you enjoy, and
Hmm.
there that's a deeper thing than, say, what I prefer over what you prefer or whatever. um so yeah, and to that, but also then, yeah, to your point of, well, here's the thing, here's the way we won the argument, is that people have a sense now, after we're coming up on, uh we're 2 years out from Revenge of the Sith at 20, right? There's an ingrained sense of just that stories have been with us, so ingrained in what Star Wars is now, that there's no sense that it's this weird other thing off to the side. Now, I guess here's the question. Hopefully, and this is already starting to happen. This definitely has started to happen. Is the sequels, for some folks, there it is this weird other thing off to the side. For others, it's very much ingrained in part of what Star Wars is, and also that depends on how much you've watched those films and sat down and enjoyed them and whatnot. But yeah, to think in terms of, I mean, especially in terms of camps, in terms of parties, in terms of
Fandom.
how, fandom. I mean, I mean, another thing, the thing I was getting at before, of you love what you love. Having these divisions and these schisms isn't the kind of fandom I want. you know
No one
um
does.
and, well, unfortunately, too many people do, and that's the problem. And so that is changing.
Mm.
But yeah, the sense of story. So I know I'm repeating myself, but yeah,
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah, like, I mean, I just kinda asked myself, what does it really mean to be a prequelist in the year of our Force Gods Mortis Gods 2024? And I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know. Unless you really like the prequels and that was your Star Wars growing up, I mean, that's
Yeah.
fair. I get that, and,
Mhm.
but it's like, what? It's like, yeah, I mean, you're right, they are part of Star Wars, we Hayden Christensen just showed up in one of these new shows. We just
Yeah,
had a whole show with Ewan McGregor showing
we're
up
gonna
in
talk
these
about that.
shows.
Yeah.
Coruscant's always showing up now, in stuff
Mhm.
for a while. So it's like, they're B1 battle droid. So yeah, I guess, in terms of that, yeah, yeah, it's like it's part of Star Wars. If anything, I think it's felt more part of Star Wars in the last 4 years than it probably has even in its entire run. It's
Right.
like now we're getting to see X-wings and a B1 battle droid next to each other. It's like mind blown. Um,
Exactly. That's kind of my point. Is that it's just all one thing together.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. And to me, it just sort of kind of feels like again, it's like the terms are over. It's like
Mhm.
no, I feel like there's no point. I mean, there's always gonna be you're always gonna be people who are like maybe
Yeah.
older than us. It's like to them, Star Wars is the original trilogy, and that's fine. That's their Star Wars. That's their Star Wars.
Mhm.
And hell, heck, there's people who only Star Wars is 1 through 6. They don't even like the Clone Wars 2008. It's just 1 through 6. That's it. Star Wars is over.
Sure.
It ended with Revenge of the Sith. Um, and that's fair. You live that life. But in terms of like, if you're engaging with Star Wars now, then yeah,
Mhm.
all the terms are kind of, in my opinion, kind of outdated because it's like
Yeah.
just all Star Wars at this point.
I think the best thing I can say
Mhm.
is that I mean I wear the shirt. I was a prequelist in that I was part of. I'd say just to say that I was part of this movement within the fandom, part of the push to recognize these films and just have a strong sense of these films as being so essential to what Star Wars is, and that because there's that change, and I was part of the change, and so I mean, and I was swept up in part, not like I was an architect of it or anything, but it, yeah, to say, yeah, but it is almost to say it's kind of like saying, well, it is a lot like saying, I saw Phantom Menace in 1999 and I did not mind Jar Jar one bit, is similar to saying I saw Star Wars in 1977 and I loved it and I was there in the theater. It's kind of this thing of saying, yeah, this is reminiscing of when we were.
Yeah.
You remember when. So people are going to say, Joel, you're going to be able to say, yeah, I saw The Rise of Skywalker in 2019 and
I
I
thought
didn't
Revenge of
mind
the
it
Sith
one.
in 2005. I'm technically part of the prequel
I
generation.
know, but what I'm going to say is you're going to be able to say in 20 years, yeah, I saw The Rise of Skywalker in 2019 and I didn't mind it one bit.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, yeah. I mean,
not everyone's going to be able to say that. And so I think there's just remembering the history of how uh we've come to this evolving story over time.
there's no sense of it's like they're going to erase it and like it's gonna no
No,
longer matter
not sure.
anymore. It's like that's gone away. That went away years
Mhm.
ago. I feel like, and I think we've only
Yeah.
doubled down at that point. It's like no, these are here to stay, people. Palpatine comes back, and Anakin was played by Hayden Christensen,
It,
and that's the way it
it's
is.
canon, guys. It's canon. There we go.
Bam. But yeah,
I
that's
mean
my week of Star Wars.
that's a great conversation. We could have a whole episode on that one right there.
Yeah.
I'll say my week in Star Wars. Well, I started the Eye of Darkness, which is great. I only
Nice.
was only able to read the prologue because I've been busy. Prade Vetter, Master Prade Vetter, whatever how you pronounce his name. Very interesting. Focusing on him because we didn't get much of him at all. We didn't really get anything. We just got a mention of him in Light of the Jedi. So
Mhm.
that's interesting. I have no idea how much more he is in this story. He's just in the prologue. I'll say what I did end up doing this weekend was only to the Mississauga Comic Expo, just kind of just outside of Toronto to the west of the city here. That was cute. They got a Death Star soap. It was okay. It was fine. It was more for kids, which is great. Was able to visit Gotham Central Comics, which is one of the great comic book stores in the Toronto area. I won't say anything more, but yeah, just really great stock and really great
Oh,
selection
nice.
there. Shout out to Ash at Bejeweled Mothma for hanging out at the Comic Expo. They were on the that really great High Republic panel at Fan Expo Canada. So definitely keep an eye on them in conversation. They're all over the book fandom and all over everything. So that's pretty cool. Lastly, I will say this is Star Wars adjacent. Star Wars adjacent. Was able to visit Heroes World, the comic book store, north of the city, kind of northern suburbs. It was in a place called Markham. It's now in a place called Richmond Hill. Whatever. That's basically, I don't know. That's basically like Westchester,
Mhm.
if that means anything to you.
No, but it sounds fun.
Or I don't know, Queens or who knows what. I don't know. Anyway, so that's yours. Well, that's the store that Iman Vellani grew up going to, which is part of that part of the city.
Nice.
And so I was able to pick up her issues 1 and 2 of the Miss Marvel comic that she wrote. She wrote a comic, co-wrote a comic, and it has the guy who runs the shop. He's in the comic, so that's pretty funny. And
cool.
also, gotta say, go watch the Marvels. Ignore the haters. Iman Vellani is incredible in that movie. Steals the show. They take some really great creative swings in that one, and I really appreciate what they do. Yeah, some things that it's coming, and people are gonna, the critiques are coming. It's not gonna be popular in some things, but the creative swings that they take, and then of course just a really wonderful story of 3 women of different ages coming together and empowering each other, and it's a story we need. 3 women of different ages, different ethnicities, backgrounds, coming together, and and showing love to each other, and having wonderful superpowers that are able to change the world and save the planet and save multiple planets. And so check that out. Again, that's Star Wars adjacent. That's Marvel. I don't know, Joel, have you ever seen the Marvels yet? Or
No, it's always hard to get to the theaters these days for me. But I hope I can.
Yeah, definitely recommend it. Okay, first off, before we dive in, I got a bit of a news story here. There you go. Very quickly, 1 second. Let me make a little bit of note here.
Oh,
There you go. Yeah, so very quickly, Dr. Aphra, the current Dr. Aphra run, is that ending? Star Wars splash page, folks. They do the Force's work. They notice that there's no Dr. Aphras in the solicits, as in kind of the all the comic book publishers announce coming forward what's coming up, and so it's called the solicits, and there's no Dr. Aphra in the solicits for February. And another thing they noticed is that the next collected edition goes up to number 40. So we saw that. That comes out, I guess. I don't know if that comes out in February. Anyway, fellow tractor beamer Chris Abbott, he chimed in and speculated that the current run that might likely be ending at issue number 40. And so we'll see. I mean, we're currently at issue number 38 this week. It makes sense. I think that fits, with a lot of with everything we've seen. Bounty Hunters, that's ending at number 42. Dark Droids, the end of Dark Droids is number 41. Now, Bounty Hunters number 41. Dark Droids crossover ending. What's going on here? Who knows what's going on? Speaking of endings and beginnings, the ongoing, let's finish. The ongoing and Darth Vader really pushing characters towards Return of the Jedi, and the end of Return of the Jedi 40 very quickly, blowing through that. So I don't know what's happening we don't know what's happening with Dr. Aphra. Again, that makes sense. Things are coming to a natural end. Okay, what's happening right now? What's going on? All right, how do I don't even have room.
Shuffle.
Come on.
Yeah, I was just doing some reading, and I felt a shiver go up my spine, as if some people were gonna talk about some cold takes, and I just thought I'd drop by, seeing as apparently that's my thing on this show.
So so we're finally able to do this segment, of course, now that we're talking about Ahsoka. You can call
hooray!
The Space Wizard show, and
bold name, the Space Wizard show.
I'm calling it the Space Wizard show. It's the one show with Space Wizard. Anyway,
that's kind of a because there was another Space Wizard show. There was Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Yeah.
True. The OG Space Wizard.
How's that not? That's literally, he's the original Space Wizard.
It's a good point. That is a good point. I'll say this. Is this is the one that's really explores space wizardry. Maybe we should call it the Space Wizardry show. Is that helpful? It's not buying. Anyways, now that we're talking about Ahsoka and able to actually talk about it, we can bring Dominic for cold takes with Dominic. So talking about how what is the one cold take, as in we got hot takes, we got incendiary takes, really bold predictions that people make for the show, and it turns out to be completely flat and completely wrong. What would you say? I'll turn it over to you.
Well,
Does this whole microphone?
well, so
break your own equipment.
yeah, I'll try not to. The one that's the coldest of cold takes to me is there was a whole movement when the first trailer came out. There was a real pushback against the concept of Sabine being force sensitive. And I cannot sort of understand, like, initially people are like, I don't know if this is the direction they're going in. I don't know if this is what I like. I don't know if this is what I want. So I get, like, people not being game for the concept. But there was a meme that was going around, and I tried desperately to find it earlier, but I couldn't. But it was this meme. It was so smarmy, where whoever made it was like, obviously Sabine isn't force sensitive because there was a whole 4-season backstory to this, and if you bothered to watch it, you would know. And like, obviously that was like a horrible take. Because, and honestly, if you go back and watch Rebels, there's clues, there's hints. Watch Trials of the Darksaber. That whole episode lays it out how a person can be in tune with the Force without having a particularly high midichlorian count. So I found that specific take to be it. The whole, like, as a general idea of Sabine, the Sabine force sensitive takes, or Sabine not being force sensitive, not being a Jedi, those takes are ice cold in retrospect, but I can understand them from a certain point of view. It's that particular, like, specific I'm right because of that makes it
I read the Wikipedia
the
page.
coldest of cold takes.
Well, I'll counter that cold take with a conversation between Lawrence Kasdan, George Lucas, and Richard Marquand in the 80s.
Yeah.
Kasdan, the Force was available to anyone who could hook into it. Lucas, yes, everyone can do it. Kasdan, not just the Jedi. It's just the Jedi who take the time to do it. Marquand, they use it as a technique. Lucas, like yoga. If you want to take the time to do it, you can do it. But the ones that really want to do it are the ones who are into that kind of thing. Also like karate.
There we go. As Dom fixes his own equipment here.
Yeah, I have a tendency to break stuff.
So yeah, Lucas and Marquand and Kasdan just laid it down for you in the 80s.
I mean, the thing about having this 4-year run to watch, that's a great cell phone, because as you say, that is the story of Sabine. What a part of the story of Sabine learning, first of all, learning to encountering Jedi, encountering Canon, encountering Ezra, encountering Ahsoka, encountering this wider galaxy. Here's another thing: it's a story of Sabine encountering herself, and what we really see in the Ahsoka show, and we'll get into this a little bit later, and in Trials of the Darksaber is the ability to tap into the Force, the ability to lift rocks or whatever. That's what we hear in The Last Jedi. It's about the ability to align yourself with what the galaxy needs and what the galaxy wants, and that is the will of the Force. That is being a servant to the light side, and the ability to launch your brother Ezra or whatever off into the Star Destroyer. That's because that's what needs to happen. I mean, there's this funny thing, meta thing going on where what the story needs and what the plot needs is also what the Force needs, because both the story and the plot and in the galaxy itself is telling us a moral lesson, giving us a moral lesson about trust, about friendship, about love and loyalty. That, for example, Thrawn is a great foil against that, to say he's never able to really understand the Force. Yeah, he can ally himself with the Night Sisters. He can ally himself with Balin and Shin to some extent, but we see Sabine tapping into genuine goodness and genuine life, and it's again that great moment in The Last Jedi where you become the great servants of life, and the great servants of life are servants of the Force, and able to and the Force responds by enabling you to do what your family needs and do what the light needs to happen. And so, yeah, it's a misunderstanding. It's it's a very mechanical thing. You brought up the M word, and again, I'm wearing this T-shirt. We talked about Phantom Menace already. I never minded the M word precisely because it provokes this kind of sense of it's just this mechanistic. I mean, I think we all get that. That's an old argument now, but this mechanistic sense of what the Force is. I'll let you jump in there.
Take it like this again. Yeah, I think again the midichlorian thing. It's so funny to me because people hated that when that comes out, and now it's being used to say like, oh, you're undoing the Force, when Joel, as you correctly pointed out, this concept goes back to those conversations that George and Asden and everybody were having in the 80s. And if you watch the original trilogy, you watch A New Hope and Empire in particular, there's nothing in there when they talk about the Force that says this is specific to any individual. It's not magic in the Harry Potter universe where you have to have it or you don't. It is, luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. That Yoda's not just saying that about him and Luke. He's saying that about everybody. Obi-Wan says, the Force is what gives the Jedi Knights power. It's an energy field that it's created by all living things. So everybody has the potential and the capacity to tap into the Force. And, if you go back to some of those criticisms of the Phantom Menace and the concept of midichlorians in that film, it was, hey, they're taking this away from us. They're taking this away from our being able to, anybody can be a Jedi. And then it got so ingrained in the concept that now, when it's going back in the other direction to what it was, some people are against that idea. And one thing that I think this show did so beautifully was show everybody and anybody jumping, anybody and everybody having the ability to be to tap into the Force. And there's that great moment in episode 5. And honestly, for as many wonderful things as happened in that episode, the best part of it to me is when Jason says to Hera, listen, you'll hear the lightsabers. And Hera does. She stops. She centers herself. She closes her eyes. She's like meditating almost, and she can hear it. And okay, yeah, it's left up a little bit to interpretation by the text, but it's strongly implied through the sound design, Mary Elizabeth Winstead's performance, the camera work, the way it's close up on her face in that moment. It's clear she's tapping into the Force. She understands that there's something bigger happening. There's something bigger at play in that moment. And while she can't fully understand it, and she's not necessarily going to dedicate her life to understanding it, she knows that her son has that innate ability to do it. But that doesn't mean that she can't do it too.
Yeah, the midichlorian thing has always been, in my opinion, just a very bad fan misinterpretation of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
By both its haters and sometimes its defenders, depending on who you ask. But the midichlorian thing is it's not like, more midichlorians means more Force. It just means Anakin had a high midichlorian count, so he's just very, very well in tune with it. It comes naturally like this. It's like someone who's a savant in math. You can be good at math, but some people are just like, I know, my brain's a calculator. And sometimes it's like, no, we got to really study hard for it. There's this really great book.
Yeah. You give, sorry, Joel, just to jump in and give another example. You give me a baseball bat, I can probably make contact with the ball. I can't hit it out of the park the way Shohei Ohtani does. If I really, really, really work at it, like that's all I did for, several months, I might be able to hit it out once. I wouldn't be able to hit it out 40 times the way he does going up against the best pitchers in the world.
Right. And I think with Sabine, that's kind of where she lies. It's like, she can be a great Jedi. She ain't going to be like Anakin probably lifting a giant statue up, but she can definitely get Ezra off on the ship. Or, but yeah, like, so I think that's always just been that misinterpretation where I People overreacted, and we kind of got stuck with it for years.
I mean, I'll jump in with this, another of our segments here. Just to take it from kind of my real world experience. Yeah, I have a specific aptitude for understanding the Bible and understanding, what the Christian tradition means, and understanding concepts maybe more complex for some people. I am a very firm believer that, pun intended, that uh, what matters isn't so much the complexity of the topic, but what language you use. And if you intentionally use language that is complicated and obscure, yeah, there's certain importance for, in academia, you need to use shorthand in order to get your point across, and people understand that. But for the normal folks just in the pews and the whatever in the seats there, it's really important to be able to communicate these complex topics in ways that they can both understand in ways that matter to them. And it's an obligation on those who actually have more education to do that for others, to be able to communicate those things in ways that they can actually that levels the playing field, that says, yeah, this is for all of us. And so it's almost to say, who knows who is among them is going to be able to really grasp concepts really well and really quickly, because it's a muscle, like also that, take the sports metaphor, muscle that you learn over time. That's the thing, is who wants to safeguard in our world, and in in Star Wars, among the Jedi, for example, who wants to safeguard and gatekeep access to the Force, versus who wants to ensure that it's available to everybody. High Republic has a great example for that.
The Force will be free.
The Force will be free. Well, I was going to say, Bell Zettifar on. Oh, actually, interestingly, the path of the open hand. I mean, they're incredibly elitist in that way. They think nobody can touch it, and then of course only the mother can touch it. In a way, I mean, a roundabout way. We have yeah. That's a good book there too. I hope. From what I've heard, the Fallen Star. Yeah, the Fallen Star. There's this really great moment of, I think Elzar and Stellan, they're racking their brains trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we figure out this space station's falling? And Bell goes over to. We've got a room full of pilots and mechanics and just and smugglers and who knows, ordinary folks, whatever, who are stranded on this station. They have their expertise, they have their skills. Why don't we all come together and seek what the will of the forces together, and find a way through? And it's a different way of tapping into the Force. Maybe it's not the way Sabine does necessarily, but yeah, I mean, it's amazing how it brings up this wild conversation about what is the Force, how does the Force work. If Finn, who mops the floors, maybe he'll be able to figure it out too. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, the Force has always been differently interpreted over the many years. Like in the 90s EU books, it's like Tim Zahn interpreted it one way, Tales of the Jedi did it a very different way. It's like very polar opposites.
And that's I think the great thing about the Force, and to credit the High Republic, that's something that they've gone out of their way to show, is the different ways different Jedi see the Force. Avar Kriss sees it one way, Elzar Mann sees it another way, Bell Zettifar, on and on and on. And Sam Witwer made a point back in several years ago now about like Han Solo using the Force, and like he's not lifting rocks, he's not pulling a cup towards himself, he's not throwing anybody off a cliff, but when he's piloting, when he's making the Kessel run in less than 12 parsecs, he's probably tapping into the Force in one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, I've always believed that. So, yeah, the Force, anyone can use it.
What a great time! Right, just off of one little cold take. There we go. Lots of really deep discussion. Certainly something we can talk about.
Warm up.
Yeah, you gotta
warm up.
Don't. Yeah. don't break your arm.
Feel free to come back anytime.
Yeah. There you go. Thanks, Dom, for chiming in on Cold Takes with Dominic, which is great to be back talking about these shows. Of course, great that the actors and the writers, they have a deal that they can live with, so we can actually talk about these things. And just looking forward to diving in more, just not just in tonight, but in the weeks to come, in the months to come, on just everything to do with the space with this Space Wizard show. This Space Wizard show.
Well, actually, you know what?
Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Well, actually, I'd actually like to get into that just a little bit, if we don't mind, as for like the starting point of the conversation before we kind of dive in. Because you know what, it is sort of interesting, right? Like, this is the thing I've always said I loved about the Disney Plus shows, is sort of like, there's always that kind of if and or kind of thing with like, why not both? It's like, I'm glad Andor and Ahsoka can exist in the same world. And I like that Kenobi is a Space Wizard show that kind of like is kind of a weird middle ground. It's like, it's not full fantasy, it's a little more gritty than that. As one person put it, it's very much, it's not about more the space wizardry so much as it's just tapping into the drama of the prequels, which it is. Like, that show more modus operandi to be fancy.
So I'm vindicated by saying Ahsoka is the Space Wizard show, and Kenobi has a space wizard in it.
In some sense, yes, because of just how much more fantasy heavy, I would argue, Ahsoka is compared to, say, Kenobi, which is a lot more drama based. Which it is. I mean, like, that's the whole thing. It's Vader and Kenobi, Anakin's whole spiel with Leia in the center. But yeah, that is sort of the nice thing. It's like, I'm glad both these shows can exist. That's why. Kenobi and or Ahsoka are kind of like my top 3 of these Disney Plus shows, because they're all kind of tapping into something I really like about Star Wars in general. So I'm glad they both, they all exist. But you're not. I don't think you actually are 100% wrong. I think
first time for everything. I'm just kidding.
Like, Kenobi is a lot. It's not really about the wizardry. I mean, it is about being a Jedi. I do think at the core of that show, it is, what is a Jedi, and the Jedi helps people. That is kind of to boil it down to like a sentence.
Also, I'll admit, I kind of forgot about Kenobi as a Jedi. For him, I mean, for me, it's all about the personal story with Anakin. And so I don't know. It's just the way our brains work goes into different directions. So there we go. Whereas Ahsoka is a lot more. Yeah, that's where I'm getting at. It's a lot more just the fantasy, the space fantasy. Anyway,
it's very much. I mean, they're both Jedi, just kind of different time, different focus. Your focus determines your view or your reality.
Yes,
but yeah. So I just wanted to get into that. But yeah, Ahsoka, the next Mandoverse spinoff, and in my opinion, the first true Mandoverse spinoff, that really has its own identity beyond just the Mando 2.5 with Book of Boba Fett, which is always a shame. I feel like that's gonna be a fluke.
Yeah, they gotta know better.
And I feel like when Skeleton Crew comes, I think that's gonna be more of its own thing. But yeah, this show, wow. I'm kind of like trying to figure out what to do here, because like we're not doing episode by episode. But I guess.
I mean, you got a good question here off the top. You wanna?
Oh yeah. Well, actually, before let's kind of just give like a brief, maybe 1 or 2 sentence summary of feelings about the show before we watched it, and then feelings about the show afterwards. So I'm going to throw it to you, Matthew. Just kind of like brief.
Yeah, I mean, before it was, this could be the greatest thing since sliced meiloorun. Before, even just as we were gearing up to talk about it, so many things, so many questions I'd have going in. Already my favorite character in TV history of all time, period. The main character of my favorite TV show of all time, period. So already had that foundation. I remember saying, the thing with Uncanny Plateau, that I think it'll give me the time to get there. I hope it gives me the time to get there, and to say just the real hope it goes for it. Hope it really takes the swings of, like as I was saying, exploring the weird, the mystical, deeper realities within the Force, and deeper realities within Ahsoka's character, and just hoping it does that, and hoping it goes there. And then the inklings I had heard, not doing anything to dispel those hopes. So That was before, and then during it became very clear it was doing that. It became very clear that, especially, she falls off the cliff. She wakes up and it's this white plane, and there's Anakin, and it's like, okay, this
Yeah,
is
you're it.
giving me everything I want, everything I've hoped for in a Star Wars show. And yeah, that again, I go back to that 5th episode is above and beyond. It's above and beyond everything we've gotten so far in the Mandoverse, for me at least. Including the Jack Black and Lizzo episode, definitely including Luke showing up on that that Architens, in the bridge there. That's fine. That's great. It's that's maybe another thing what this T-shirt represents is I'm just going to be more emotionally drawn to when they reach it back into the prequels versus when they reach back into the original trilogy. It means I'm more likely to buy stuff like let's see if I can show you like that clone trooper there and the N1 and all that.
Right. I mean, everyone. I think the nice thing about these, what I like about just these Mando shows in particular, especially just this era, has always been, I feel like they've done a pretty decent job, kind of giving something for everyone.
Mhm.
Like, you OT fan, you get your Luke. If you're a prequel fan, you're getting your Hayden. You sequel fan, you get your Hux. Sequels kind of have to a little bit wonkier, but
Yeah,
still,
they're gonna have time to.
Rey's not born yet. Or if she is, she's just a little wee one. No, I don't think. I don't think she's born yet. Yeah, so it's like still baby Ben Solo time. Yeah, for me, it's kind of the same thing. I wonder, this is like, as we say, the Space Wizard show in a lot of ways. I wonder if this makes Kenobi. I wonder, does this show like make Kenobi like better or worse for you? Because now it's like, did you want Kenobi to be more like this? But then it's like you accepted like it's more about Anakin and Obi-Wan's relationship than doing weird Mortis stuff.
No, I'm glad it was what it was. I mean, I think it could have been a little more into Anakin and Vader, because, well, the extent to which Ahsoka was Anakin Ahsoka, at the heart of it. I'm
talking about Kenobi.
Yeah, I know. I'm saying, but we're saying about what we got in Ahsoka. How does that make Kenobi? I mean, I think with Kenobi, it has its own sort of sense of a bit of a glut in the middle, and then finishes strong. That's its own thing, right? And that's not to take away anything from Vivian Lara Blair or definitely from Moses Ingram or whoever. And
that fourth episode.
At least not from Ewan McGregor for sure. But to say, this one was just a lot more consistently great and tapped into characters. It did the thing. I mean, I don't know. The thing is the fan service question is in my mind and by that I mean the way Ahsoka builds on characters we're already invested in, whereas I mean, and Kenobi does that, of course, with Obi-Wan, with Vader, and with Leia, but there's no guarantee we're gonna see Moses Ingram again. There's no guarantee or Reva again. We're no guarantee we're gonna see whoever these other characters again.
It's all Inquisitors, so
yeah, it's all Inquisitors, but this is a continuation of after 4 seasons of Hera and Sabine and Ezra, right? After 7 seasons of Ahsoka, so it already had a leg up and a step up. So I guess it isn't really the fair comparison. What I think I'll say one more thing is I'm looking forward to maybe even more about Anakin and Ahsoka, because I mean that's an interesting point, is to compare the 2 shows, because I mean what we have is Ahsoka's master or Anakin's master and Anakin's apprentice, and they both have this confrontation with him. Of course, the confrontations are very different, and Anakin is in a very different place with season 5 of Ahsoka. He's back. He's Anakin again, whereas Vader is Vader trying to forget Anakin in Kenobi. But it is, the fact that we have both. It's this interesting diptych.
I'll quote a friend of ours, Steven Schinder. Hi, if you're listening. Who brought up something a couple years ago. Not a couple years ago, a couple of months ago.
Yeah,
I wrote something about Kenobi. And he said he felt like Kenobi was made in 2007. And he wasn't talking about the visual effects, although I can agree with him on that. But what I think he meant by that,
Mhm.
and I agree with him on this, is
Yeah.
Kenobi feels like it was made in a time before all that Clone Wars stuff ever happened. Like, it really
Yeah.
just feels like it's, with the weird thing about the Inquisitors, which is kind of its own little weird thing. It does feel like the story being written with just 1 through 6 in mind.
Yeah.
Well, this is being written, and obviously because it's Filoni, with 6 seasons, 7 seasons, and 4 seasons of Clone Wars and Rebels.
Yeah.
So I don't really know what any of that means in terms of like your preferences, or just it's just a feeling, just different.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, I will say again, I keep mentioning this with Kenobi, you know, it has John Jackson Miller's novel in mind. It has Kieran
wouldn't say
Gillen
that.
and Charles Soule's comics somewhat in the background there, somewhere in the background. And so, it does have other materials. This nothing compared to obviously with Ahsoka. It has them
Oh,
in the
yeah.
foreground, right? These characters that are in the foreground.
Well, I mean,
I mean, Jason is literally saying it's just like when back when Ezra beat the bad guys or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I think I'll say this, and I've always had this, and maybe in a weird way you have it too, but you're able to reconcile it a bit more.
Mhm.
You're a Clone Warsist before you're a prequelist in a lot of ways. I'm accusing you of something. I'm kidding. Well, what I mean by that is there's always been this divide for me between the prequels and I guess the whole Six Saga and the Clone Wars. And I've always talked about opening up, like, I can't watch Revenge of the Sith and think Anakin had all these adventures with Ahsoka, and Kenobi had all these adventures, like he fought Darth Maul again and had this whole thing with the teen, like, and obviously there's the behind the scenes reasons for that because Ahsoka wasn't even a drawing in Filoni's paper. So I always felt that the Clone Wars, despite being in the prequel era, created its own sense of identity, and it's in a weird sense, almost its own kind of universe, even though it is going to lead up to Revenge of the Sith, where it almost feels like it's its own separate thing, despite being part of the thing. I know that sounds so weird, but
I know what you're saying. I wouldn't say, like, I'd say for me, Clone Wars was essential in me developing prequelism. That's true. But also say one of the reasons I'm drawn to both is because the aesthetic is because
I love both too. Don't get me wrong.
The Phase 2 clone armor, because the Venator class, the Venator Star Destroyer, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that is something that's in common with both. Because of the politics of the Republic, and that is something that's in common with both. So I don't know. I mean, for me, when I say prequels, I include Clone Wars in that.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, like for me, I've always had this thing. It's like they're born of the same seed, and then they just kind of diverge in a weird way. But I don't want to get too much into that because
I mean, they converge in Siege of Mandalore.
They converge,
which we see in this show. So anyway.
Right, it's I don't want to get into it, but for me, I was pretty hyped. This was kind of the show I'm looking forward to. If you had episode 5, I had episode 6, and even though I can't say it because I wasn't born there, I now have a feeling certain fans who were reading Star Wars books in 1991 have lived a dream, have seen a dream come true in a way they never thought would happen. So, that was my moment of like, everything, I can now die happy. I have seen everything.
It's gonna be one of the great groundbreaking, not groundbreaking, just the great. What's the word?
Tentpole moments.
Tentpole moment, but a big build up. There's been this build up to live action Thrawn. Thrawn is what you're talking about for 32 years. How can you? Is it 32? Yeah, I can do math.
Probably
32 years, right? There's just been this steady climb that got kicked into high gear when he showed up in the animation. Yeah. So
I mean, going further back. Yeah, I mean, like I had to be like, not gonna do Thrawn in episode 7. They're not gonna do Thrawn in episode 7. It's like we're never gonna get the Heir to the Empire thing. I mean, I'm glad we didn't. I think in the hindsight, I don't think it would have been a good adaptation. But I'm glad we're getting something now. But so to me, and I agree. I think this and Andor for me are the most consistent shows. I don't want to compare both, but it's just in terms of like things like Mando, where it's like they have high highs and like really low lows. We can debate which ones are which. I know people on the internet love to do that. And it was Kenobi, like, to me, it's kind of flubbed in episode 4. I actually really like episode 3 for me. And then about 5 and 6, it really picked up. And obviously, that finale really kind of saved the show in terms of how cathartic that final duel is and everything around that final episode for sure. Just like emotionally, just like, oh my God, this is the thing. And then Book of Boba Fett, it's like, you got episode 2. I really like the Mando episode, even though it shouldn't be in there. And there's some fun moments, but
these two are definitely the most consistent.
Yeah, but those two shows are like the most. I didn't feel like you can say which one was more tight, whatever. But it's like to me, it's like I didn't feel like Ahsoka like dived hard or like anything, but it's also like it's pretty on like 7 and 5 and 6 were kind of like the height for me, and maybe like it dived just a little bit down in those final 2 episodes. But outside of that, honestly, it's like I don't think but it's like it did not like it's like 2 episodes just like really bad like. That whole thing is just more but that's Ahsoka. Our thoughts. But now let's get into the meat and grind, shall we? I've been rambling a little too long.
Meat and potatoes.
Yeah. I know. We've been building this up, folks. We're sorry.
That's true. We've waited months, so that's another thing. We waited so long to finally be able to talk about this show.
Yeah, but so I guess we talked a little bit about Sabine and Ahsoka, but actually before we get into there, let's just ask that question. As we are called Ion Canon, do you have to watch Rebels to understand this show? I'll say no. I don't think you do. I think the show's pretty straightforward for anybody who hasn't seen it. It's about a Jedi master whose student got issues. The master's got issues. They got to work out their issues. And they got to stop this blue guy from coming back. It's pretty simple. If you want to watch Rebels to get the context and maybe like deeper, get into it, sure. But I don't think it's gatekeeping your enjoyment of the show. And neither do I think it's either Clone Wars or that Mando spin-off, a Mando episode. Like I think you could honestly watch the show without any of it and get and understand it. Whether or not it works for you on an emotional level, that's subjective. But in terms of like the structure, I think you can just watch it on its own and understand it. Maybe go back later.
Yeah. Strictly speaking, you don't even have to know that Ahsoka is Anakin's apprentice. It says it straight up, and it leads you into it. And even with the hollow projection, and then the Force ghosts, and the world between worlds thing, and then the Force ghosts, it leads you into it. So yeah, I mean that's one of the great strengths of this show is it's able to give people enough background, enough common archetypal story that they can just dive into, and it rewards everything and everyone who's seen everything, and continues all those stories as well, and shows how strong those stories have been. I mean, to say that they serve as that they were a main story. This is kind of gets to what your thought at the very beginning here. Serves as main story for themselves and backstory for this, and they, I mean, again, I mentioned, young Ahsoka saying this is the Clone Wars. No kidding. They snuck in the exposition into character moment dialogue, like Jason saying to Hera, "Hey mom, this is the time you guys beat the bad guys, right?" Yeah, and we know he's talking what he's talking. We've seen that. We have it burned in our memory. We probably just watched it like a week before the show started.
I did.
So, a lot of us did, and so cats on stream. There you go. Good job. Yeah. So no, I don't think so. I think it's as the answer. My answer to all of those things, just like the duel in Kenobi, it just changes your perception of it, changes your feeling of it in different ways, and there's a different emotional depth to it. Doesn't make it more or less or anything.
Right. It's like saying you need the prequels to understand the original trilogy. No, your perceptions will, and hopefully your depth will increase with it. I mean, I hope so. I know some people didn't, but but you can still watch those 3 movies and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
You're not confused. But yeah, that's sort of my basic answer to that. Okay, now let's get into Master and Apprentices. That's sort of the big theme of all of this. Master Apprentice. Ahsoka, Sabine, Shin, Baylan, Anakin, Ahsoka, and just interesting seeing kind of the relationships between the kind of the 3 sets Sadly, I would say the weakest, and this is what hurts me the most because he's gone, is Balin and Shin.
Hmm.
I could have used more from those two, and it just hurts now that Ray Stevenson is gone, and I don't know what they're gonna do with season two. Whether recast, change things up, I don't know. We don't know. I can't really speculate honestly, but
Yeah.
it's hard. But I think they did a good job setting up as Ahsoka and Sabine's relationship, especially considering we didn't even know that they were gonna be master and apprentice at the end of the road because they never did talk to each other, not
So
even
that's the
once.
thing. We haven't even seen that season. So
There's this whole show in between that we
yeah.
missed. And Anakin and Ahsoka, obviously we know their relationship, and it was so good to see them again, especially seeing Hayden and just kind of do the Clone Wars thing. And I was listening to a podcast. He brought up, when he met, what did Anakin do? He tried to prevent someone he loved from dying, which is kind of what he does, but in a very different way now. And we can get into that a bit later. But
Mhm.
yeah, how did you think, Matthew, how the show handled the themes of master and apprentice
I
between
mean,
the three sets of masters and apprentices?
it's definitely at the forefront.
Hmm.
I mean, in terms of those three pairs, obviously, like the main character, and again, it's another thing of saying another diptych. You have Ahsoka's master and Ahsoka's apprentice, and it. One thing I really loved is the way it really. Well, this is the thing I was hoping it would reflect on the end of season 5 of Clone Wars, her leaving what we see in Rebels and how she blames herself for
Hmm.
Anakin falling to the dark side, and Anakin has to confront her on that and has to say in a way that's different than the way Vader says, "Don't blame yourself, Obi-Wan. I killed Anakin." It's don't blame yourself, Ahsoka. Vader was seduced, and confront this guilt within you. This thing that we've been hoping to see. I mean, it's another thing we've been hoping to see. And it's almost a confirmation of our sense of her story over this time. I mean, the tricky thing is though, and it doesn't really give us a satisfactory answer. It is true that Ahsoka leaving left Anakin all alone when the Jedi and everything else was falling apart around him.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, that's another connection between Clone Wars and Revenge of the Sith, right? Um, and so it's hard because on the one hand, she isn't at fault. On the other hand, it's something that happened that led him into Palpatine's arms, led him to say, "Oh yeah, you see what happened to this apprentice, this sister that you loved. See how the Jedi handled them." And so, uh, what's happening there though, and this is the best part of this, is that this isn't simply about us helping to understand Clone Wars. It's seeing the story in the present, in the moment of Ahsoka coming to renewed faith in what the Jedi could be, what the Jedi could be with it, what she as a Jedi can be. And that's of course the moment where she does die and is reborn to some extent and becomes Ahsoka the White and says, I am going to go back and uh, do what I can to be present and active in the galaxy. It's similar to Luke in the Last Jedi. Maybe not as final for Luke, but not as final for Ahsoka, but it is. And so, Anakin's final lesson is to
Luke.
not be so bound by the past and not be so beholden but to it. Um, Ahsoka and Sabine, yeah, I mean, it teases so much more. I think we're going to get a lot more in season 6 about just what happened there because they're both marooned on
I
this
would just say
planet.
season two, just because in case anyone getting
Oh,
confused on
sorry,
what you're
season
talking about.
2. I meant season 6 of Rebels. Season 5 of Rebels. I don't know why I said season 6. Why did I say season 6? I meant season 2.
Well, season 6 of Rebels, if you consider season 1 of Ahsoka season 5, but I don't want to. Now we're just getting into numbers, and I don't want
No,
to
but
confuse.
that's what happened in season 5, as in
Right.
whatever this middle period that it isn't. It's just the story. It's just the backstory.
Right.
Yeah, but they did a really good job of showing another strained relationship, another strained connection, and how I mean, another thing of Sabine, the reason she can't tap into the Force, in part, is because she blames herself. She accepts, oh, she just wasn't strong enough, and and Huyang isn't being helpful in that. Because Huyang still, I mean, he has to take midichlorians into account a little bit, right?
He's been
It's
around
not
for
like,
25,000 years, so
so he does have to a little bit, but also maybe that's not what he's talking about in terms of aptitude. Who knows? But there's that interesting comment about Balin and Shin. I I get what you mean. I think, well, first of all, I'll say here's what they might do with Balin and Shin. Stellan, Shadows of Starlight, number one, number two. Um, it's Elzar and Avar. Stellan plays a part in that, even though he's dead. His influence is there. His influence is on display, and so I think even if, say, they have Balin having died off screen somehow, Shin is still going to be able to take his mantle and continue what he is trying to do with these massive mortis statues. So I do think there's still a possibility there. Yeah, it was very cryptic, right? Even those sayings at the end, how much is Balin including Shin in understanding what Balin's on about? Is Shin kind of one dimensional, or does she have some depth to her?
I mean, it looked like it
Balin,
because she looked like she
yeah,
was about to accept Ahsoka's offer. Like when Ahsoka's
yeah,
like, "I can help you," she's kind of like, "Do I
she's
want
thinking
to?"
about it. Yeah.
She's thinking about it. She's thinking
Um.
about it. Do I want to be my
So
girlfriend?
yeah, I think we might need. Yeah, there's another thing that shipping Shin and Sabine. Uh, yeah, so you're right. We need more. I think we'll somehow get more in season 2. That's maybe another thing, is they really have multiple seasons in view. They did
Oh yeah.
not give us everything. Unlike they had to give us everything in Kenobi. They had to give us more than everything, I guess, in Book of Boba Fett. But here
You
they
need to give
gave us,
more Book of Boba Fett. Period.
yeah, well, that's true. But here they definitely said, or I mean, even say in Miss Marvel and WandaVision, they gave us everything in those shows, and the different studios, different writers. But you know what I mean? It's similar type of sense of storytelling. They really said, we're not going to give you everything. We're just going to set a lot of things up for
Yeah,
season 2.
my critique on that would only be, I just think we just need a bit more hook. Like I don't need like an explanation. I don't need Balin to go. You see, the Mortis gods are the three people. Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, why are you going to these Mortis gods? Like, are you looking to drain the Force? Are you gonna just have a talk? Like what?
Or even what he means by the beginning and what he's really looking for. Just some
Yeah.
more of a hint of what he's looking for. I get what you mean. It was a little frustrating, but also that's the
His
nature
his
of
his
serial storytelling. But
Yeah, his goal's a little more unclear compared to, say, Thrawn's goal. Thrawn's goal is pretty straightforward. I
yeah.
want out of here.
Oh, and out of
But
here so I can go take over the galaxy, right?
yes. But yeah. But that's the thing. I am very curious because unlike say, I'm going to say, unlike say Cara Dune, what happened to that situation,
Yeah.
I do think Filoni has a purpose with these characters, and that's the one thing I think.
Mhm.
I think Filoni's got over Favreau, and it's not a problem per se. I just think it's just a style and kind of what the shows are,
Yeah.
and if you kind of Filoni's show had a lot. There's a lot more. Everything I kind of do has a purpose to it, and it will pay off in some way.
We
Whether or
just
not
don't
like
trust him. That's the
right, it will pay off, and obviously I do think he had big plans for Balin and Shin. I think he has big plans for Shin. I cannot see just the way those characters were introduced. Like these are characters no, these characters I got plans for. I got a Sarge Ventress whole artworks of plans for them.
Yeah.
Maybe Shin is the kind of the next Ventress in that front as well.
Yeah.
But 'cause she kind of got a Ventress thing going on where she had like a dark side master who then she leaves
Yeah.
and then she
I
probably
mean, there are literal Dathomir Night Sisters, but
exactly. I mean, I said when I was watching the show, Balin to me is like what I feel like a more in-depth Count Dooku is kind of like in some ways, just not being
interesting.
separatist.
Yeah.
But obviously, I just think we're all kind of in this weird spot because of the tragedy of losing Ray Stevenson and kind
Yeah.
of that kind of what are they gonna do? But yeah, I that's my only real critique. But outside of that, it's like, and I kind of understand, Ahsoka's hesitancy. Like,
Mhm.
Sabine may have been wanting to use the Force for the wrong reasons because she did kind of lose her home and her parents and
Yeah.
her family, and that's kind of why she really wanted to go see Ezra because like Ezra's kind of the last family she's got left that may be alive while everyone is known dead because the Empire
mean,
destroyed Mandalore.
The first time we see Ahsoka live action, the first time we see her in this time period,
Mhm.
she refuses to train Grogu. And
Mhm.
we have this whole story of Din trying to get Grogu back to his kind. Of course, the story is that Din is his kind, but
Yeah.
she, for the same reason Luke isn't willing to train Rey. Oh, this whole horrible, terrible thing happened. I can't repeat that.
Right.
And fear either leads to hate or it leads to complacence, leads to accepting that the Emperor has already won. Uh,
And even in this whole arc, I think Ahsoka's mindset also changes.
yeah.
It's like, it's
Well,
not.
that is
It's
the arc. That is the
yeah, that's the arc. But also,
right.
like in terms of like, she starts out like, no, we gotta stop Thrawn. We gotta stop Thrawn. We can't let Thrawn come back. And she's not wrong. I don't want to say,
Mhm.
oh, she's wrong to be worried about Thrawn coming back. She
Sure.
should be. Like, it's gonna be a bad thing that happens. But I think also Ahsoka kind of learns, and maybe by the end, that's why she's a little more lackadaisical about it, where it's like, Thrawn's back. That's a problem. We can't like just go like, hey, let the Force
Mhm.
handle it. But she's also kind of like, Ezra's back in the universe. This
Yeah.
is a net positive kind of a situation. So it's sort of like I'm going to try and stop this, but I'm not. I'm going to have a kind of a different attitude about it. Kind of.
But also that Sabine is there,
Right.
and that's I think the biggest evidence of a shift is her working with Sabine, being more playful, having the younger Ahsoka being more a part of her, the younger joking R2E, Ashley Eckstein R2E as a part of her personality more that wasn't on display. I mean, that's kind of this weird thing about that the Mandalorian episode and the Book of Boba Fett episode is just how dour she is. And through this whole series, she allows it more. But then when she's confronted her darkness, when she's tapped into her failures as a Padawan, and remembers what it's like to be a Padawan. Yeah, and that's maybe the key. Remembers what it's like to be a Padawan, how confusing and stressful and difficult it is. She's able to actually lighten her mood. Like the whole production gets lighter. Her robes get lighter. Her demeanor gets a bit more jokey and folksy. Her way of talking, again, it's like early to middle Clone Wars more. For most of it, it was Rebels very clipped. We must confront Thrawn, almost Vulcan in a way. Here, she and season 7 of Clone Wars, she's already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, by at the end of episode 5, the Purgle trip, the road trip, and then throughout, yeah, she's there, and then wins over. My point is, she wins over Sabine, and
Right.
brings her back, earns her trust again.
I love the fact that
that's the again, that's set up for season 2, but it is an arc, a story that is able to really have come to a point of enough completion that we're satisfied that there has been movement there.
Yeah.
So I'm really, and it gets excited to see what the two of them together can do in season 2. I know they're they're away from the galaxy. Shin and maybe Balin are out there. This planet's weird. What's happening? What are those statues, etc.?
What's going on?
But,
yeah. Yeah, and I was satisfied. I understand some people would say like maybe I would have liked a bit more of a conversation between Ezra and Sabine about the fact like Sabine kind of did something really selfish and stupid and kind of undid Ezra's whole not undid, but kind of risked it a little bit. And I like, what's Ezra? I mean, I'm sure Ezra would have forgiven her or anything, but it's sort of like, Ezra is like, I mean, you still did something kind of stupid. And she stayed behind, so it's not like she's getting rewarded. She's kind of she's now like, she almost made a trade. It's like, okay, we're stuck here, but now Ezra, you're back home, so I'm going to trade. We'll switch places.
I mean, ultimately, is it stupid or is it Is
Well,
it
it's not.
human?
I mean, it's
That's
human. Yeah,
you
it's
know
human. But I wish there
you
was
know
more of a conversation about it. That was my.
sure. And I think again, I think whatever's going on that planet. Well, first of all, what your point to your point, Ezra's there. There's a trained Jedi back in the galaxy, another one. Um, but also, yeah, Ahsoka and Sabine are there to explore what the heck is happening on that planet, what that whole planet's about, because there's something going on there. We don't know. The witches, the Night Sisters are there. Uh,
Right.
there's the stuff about Kujet and his temple, and then those massive statues, which again we'll get into next week. But
Right.
yeah, so I think it's not just gonna be a net positive. It's gonna be all is as the Force wills it, and
Right.
even to say Thrawn coming back in the grand scheme of things, yeah, it's gonna be a reckoning. There's gonna be some havoc being wreaked by a blue guy, but what if that's the only way for him to be dealt with once and for all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, before we get into the blue guy, I realize I don't really have him on the notes.
Yeah.
Ezra's great. I love him. I
Yeah.
love this Ezra. This is great. I think my buddy Red Leader, who was on the podcast, we were talking
Mhm.
with the episode, and he brought up a good point of like, oh yeah, Edward's like he's not even sure if his plan even worked. Like if you think about it, like he and Thrawn were hopping off. And it's like, yeah, did the Empire actually fall? That was kind of the reason I did this.
Yeah.
Like did it? And it's like, yeah, it did kind of. I mean, yeah, New Republic in charge. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, Ezra's kind of like he doesn't even know if the war. He could, for all he's concerned, the war could still be going on.
Yeah.
So that was a good moment. But yeah, let's talk about him. Talk about the big blue guy. The big blue guy a lot of us have been waiting for several decades.
Mhm.
And what was first just a dream has become frightfully true for those who may oppose us.
Is that how he sounds like? There you go.
You have to talk very quietly. Oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Weird.
the big blue guy, Thrawn. Man, it was so cool seeing him. Just Lars Mikkelsen commands the room. I really like the direction they're going with him teaming up with the Night Sisters. Apparently, Ezra says he found them. They were asleep, and he woke them up. These Night Sisters, and I really think that's interesting. And it's kind of interesting. It's like Thrawn's essentially replacing one patron dark side cult to help the Empire with all of the Sith with another in the Night Sisters now.
Interesting.
Which is I think really kind of an interesting kind of way to look at it. And just it's an interesting relationship because it's like it's kind of Macbethy, like the three witches who serve
Yeah.
this King Lord Thrawn.
It's not kind of it is.
Yeah, and it's like he kind of very much has them under his authority to a certain extent, obviously, and just wondering what now that was okay. I was okay with them kind of being coy what he actually planned. I have my own theories I can get into later, but just seeing them and just seeing Thrawn and that confrontation with Sabine, which we talked about last week, which was really good.
Yeah.
And obviously, at the end of the day, Thrawn has his victory. He gets back, and now he's going to reunite the Empire. Just the build up to Thrawn. It's just, it's like if Thrawn comes back, these Imperial remnants are going to unify under him because he's the big cheese. All very exciting. But, Matthew, what was your thoughts of the lead up to Thrawn in the show, and then when we finally see the big blue guy himself?
I'm glad they saved him until episode 6. Is that when it was?
Yes.
Around there, and then we had a good chunk. It was the 3 episodes with him, just to hear him, just to see Lars Mikkelsen just embody this character that he's voiced for a good number of years now. Definitely has that confidence, that gravitas. It's always interesting, Thrawn and the Force. We have the paper stories of the Ascendancy and the Skywalkers. We have everything with Vader and Palpatine. Again, in these novels, that does get a bit of an airtime.
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention. We win on that front.
That Thrawn knows who Anakin is, knows what he's like, knows kind of how he might have taught Ahsoka. I mean, you don't need to have red alliances doesn't need to have had anything to do with this. But for those of us who have, and those of us who are looking forward to the comic adaptation by Jody Houser and Timothy Zahn, yeah, that was such a great moment, both the Clone Wars era and the Imperial era, to really cross over and interact. And so here's this another touch point with the Skywalkers who have Ahsoka, and so yeah, I mean, it also, of course, tying in with the fact that Anakin does show up in this show, right? That there is just this strong sense, even for those who haven't seen anything else before. Oh yeah, this is what Anakin's like, and now Thrawn is able to anticipate. That was interesting. Then yeah, everything to do with Thrawn and the Force. He confronts the Bendu. The Bendu confronts him. He is defeated by the Bendu. He is sent packing. And by this storm that is in the air, something he doesn't quite understand, and so he goes away and he's taken off by the Purgle, something he doesn't quite understand, and now he's able to connect with these Night Sisters and use them in this mutually beneficial arrangement that clearly they're on the dark side, so how much are they really in cahoots, able to support each other and support each other's goals and empower each other? They're not. They're using each other.
I
But
can already see the tensions too.
yeah, it's already there. But I think, but well, my point being is that it really raises the stakes, makes him that much more formidable when now that he's, well, even when he's confronting Ahsoka, or sending Morgan down to confront Ahsoka and dealing with her. It makes him all that more formidable now that he's back in the galaxy, and he has more of a flexibility to when he's confronting these Force users and encountering them, and the ability to even incorporate them into his plans. And so it makes, I mean, again, this is about future storytelling, but it's what this show is set up in light of what's come before. Yeah, it makes however they're able to defeat him ultimately all that more interesting, because they can't use simple space wizardry. They have to use the connections between them. And that's, I think, what we said before, what you might have said before, that's the last hurdle, the last thing that he isn't necessarily going to be able to understand is friendship, the power of friendship, which gets, I mean, to what we were saying with Sabine, right? Is Sabine is able to tap into the Force because she's able to tap into herself in a way that Thrawn probably isn't. But I mean, you never know. You also never know what how Thrawn is going to go down in the Filoni film or however. You never know. I'm still like, is there hope for him yet? You never know. But
Sorry.
it was an interesting development and a very well thought out development for him to be able to effect. I mean, he's able to strand Ahsoka and Sabine. That's no small feat.
Yeah, I really thought the Night Sister angle was really interesting. Night Sisters, obviously going back even before the Clone Wars to the 90s books. They've been a staple of Star Wars Darksiders for a long time. And I really like a little bit of the lore behind the Night Sisters of both. They come from this planet called Peridia, maybe originally. There was a Dathomiri Empire once upon a time, the great civilization of old that's been wiped out. And now this alliance with Thrawn is very interesting because, who's responsible for the destruction of the Night Sister clan? Thrawn's old boss, the Emperor. I don't know how much Morgan Elsbeth knows or how much the mothers know or how much Thrawn even knew, quite frankly. But yeah, that's probably gonna come back maybe to bite them in the butt, him in the butt later. Because it was technically the Separatists who did it, but it's all Palpatine. Palpatine is the Empire. It's all his evil. So there's that. It's the Sith, which Thrawn aligned himself with first before he aligned himself with the Night Sisters. Which is really interesting. There's this one moment where I feel like I already see the tension where Thrawn's like, bombard this temple, and the Night Sisters kind of give him this look, like, do what now with the temple? And he's like,
The sacred texts.
yeah, it's like, just bomb it. We
Yeah.
gotta get out of here. I don't care. It's like, and that's sort of the thing I like about Thrawn is like he says he's all about art and preservation, but it's like, yeah, he'll destroy it if he needs to. Doesn't
If he
care.
has to, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it makes me wonder, yeah, going back to Dathomir, it's an exciting choice, and I'm really looking forward to that. What might he do to their home, to the Night Sisters' home? Is he going to continue the destruction that Grievous and Dooku brought to I mean, of course, Palpatine, or and is that going to be the turning? I mean, they say, how dare you destroy our home, or the home, Talzin's home, or whoever. It's going to be so artfully done. We know that, but maybe, to say, that is an interesting thought. I hadn't thought of that, because my sense, I feel like it's the separatists, right? That's what Marin says. It's the separatists. That's what we have in Maul. Maul, what's it called? The
Maul blames the Sith by the end. It's like it's all Palpatine.
Yeah, but it's Grievous who sneaks up on Taliesin and takes her out, right? So yeah, but hopefully, they'll have to tease that out more. They'll have to bring that out more. That'll be more influence of the Sith in the story, which hasn't been much beyond, of course, Vader showing up. And so
even then, it's like, it's like
really
about
Anakin.
Thrawn the Empire. Yeah, but because I've always like this. If you want to kind of put on your Legends cap for a second, this is if you want to if Dave is pulling through things for a little bit, maybe he is. It's like the Dathomiri right now are taking the place of the Nogri, Thrawn's bodyguard, who killed him, and the Nogri backstory was the Clone Wars ruined their land. The Empire came, and said, "Hey, we're gonna help you." Vader and personally was like, "Hey, I'm gonna do something for you." So they're like, "Oh, yes, worship Lord Vader." Obviously, they don't. Thrawn somehow gets a hold of the Nogri, and then by the end they realize, "Hey, the Empire's screwing us." Rook is like, "Screw you, for my people, die, Thrawn."
So I wonder if that's something similar with the Night Sisters, that those tensions finally come to a head somehow.
Yeah.
Also, interesting note. I mean, I wonder, we have a mention of Leia, of Lady Vader in this.
Maybe. I mean, there's not much of a Vader Night Sister connection.
Lady Vader, as in Leia.
I know, but there's not much of a Lady Vader Night Sister mention. Although the courtship of Princess Leia, where Han and Leia get married, did have Dathomir involved in it. So who knows? That's another big thing. But that's a whole.
How all this is leading to speculation on season 2. I don't know.
I mean, there's a lot of 90s Legend stuff in the story, so in a little bit. So also, I love Thrawn's whole just shtick. Like, I love his stormtroopers. I love Enoch, his captain of the guard. I love how he just had like this fanatical following to him. Like, they're all chanting Thrawn, Thrawn, Thrawn. It's like
that's another thing about that's another change in that he's able to use mythos and myth and drama in a way he wasn't before, right? When in Rebels and what we see, he's very much using respect, which is different from most Imperials, but he's using the standard Imperial order now that he doesn't have anyone looking over his shoulder, now that he's clearly being defeated by Force users and this taken away by this mystical whales. Who knows how those work. He's able to tap into, now that they're stranded, and these stormtroopers are stranded, he's able to tap into, build up this myth of my divinity as the one who's going to keep you safe and protect you if you are willing to go die for me. There's the irony there. Enoch being the one who walked with God and ascended in the let's bring that back.
there's a lot of theology here. I always forget that. Like, use it. This is the time. I think.
Well, Enoch. So Enoch is considered a good character in the Bible, and he has this whole apocryphal library of books that deal with. Actually, interestingly, deal with. I'm trying to remember. like so to deal with Noah's Ark and this group of his family and these animals who actually are on the flood and they leave on the flood. And Enoch, I'm trying to remember, goes and he's able to. Also, the scholars believe that he represents a community who drew their origins to Noah's Ark and the remnant after that, as opposed to most of Hebrew scriptures is written from the perspective of people who drew their origins from the Exodus. And I mean that's is Caleb is the person Caleb and then Ezra. Okay, here am I going? I'm going for this. I'm just thinking about this now. This is just into the weeds. So most of what we now consider Judaism, and its antecedents point their origin to the Passover. To let me know if I'm not making sense here. Those who came from out of slavery in Egypt, and there's this whole story or origin story, and founding myth of being slaves in Egypt, and then coming up Moses in the Exodus, right?
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting. Caleb is one of the spies that Moses sends into the Promised Land. Is one of the early spies to go and scope it out, and then the whole nation goes out. Ezra, this is a number of centuries later. There's also another part of this origin to Judaism as the Exodus, and then they're in Babylon and under rule of the Babylonian Empire and
Ezra.
Yeah. Well, yeah, here's where I'm going. And so they return back to Jerusalem, and Ezra is the priest who leads the people and rebuilds the temple and restores and founds effectively Jewish religion. I'm broadly generalizing. There's Ezra.
I mean, have you seen how Ezra dresses in the show?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's great. And the beard and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Ezra. If there are Jews, coded Jews in Star Wars, it's Ezra Bridger, right?
Oh yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Jedi is very coded Judaism.
But here's the thing with Enoch is, again, I look this up, I can research this, but I know Enoch is someone who I think before he's supposed to walk with God, and then he he doesn't actually die. He gets lifted up into heaven with God forever. But then he has this whole there's this library of those this offshoot group who draws their origins to there's Noah and then the flood, and then just Noah's family is left, and so there's the species is reborn, and so people point to that as okay, this is where we come from, and this has more relevance for us as a founding myth, this offshoot group that doesn't exist anymore. And they wrote this whole library called Enoch. And I mean, Ezra Bridger, this is a strong sense. Caleb Doom and Ezra Bridger are the ones who
you're freezing a little bit.
Oh, I'm freezing. Yeah, my Wi-Fi is kind of conking out a little bit here.
There we go.
Yeah, so Ezra Bridger and Caleb Doom and Ezra Bridger are, they're the ones who are back in the galaxy trying to restore the Jedi Order. Ezra comes back from his exile and is going to have a part in restoring the Jedi Order in this New Republic era. And so there's we hope. Enoch, he's off in this arc called the Chimera.
Yeah, Star Destroyer.
And because the Empire's been destroyed, there's been the flood of the rebellion, and they're off, and now he's coming back. And so it's, I don't know what relevance this all has, but maybe it speaks to the fanaticism of saying, no, you rebel scum, you are the flood that has destroyed all that is true and good and orderly. I mean, that's not so much Gideon's whole thing, but the people who are willing to follow Gideon, I think, and the Imperial Remnant.
And Thrawn.
So, yeah, it really, I'm just thinking of just the names here. What's the name? Yeah, Enoch. Yeah,
I'd
the
like to think there's
fanaticism of
something
them
to
trying
it.
to restore the empire. Say this is what return to order, return to security.
For the security
Because
of our
in the face of
galaxy.
this chaotic flood of the rebellion.
Yeah, and well, you gotta get your Wi-Fi back up and running here because you keep freezing. Oh dear. There we go. Yeah, this is what the original Thrawn's fun is. There is no emperor to command him. There's no Tarkin. There's no Vader. Everyone's gone. He is now the top dog, Imperial out there. Yeah, you got all these Shadow Council people. But let's face it, Thrawn could probably easily handle them if he wanted to. They're following him. He's now the top. He is essentially the emperor in all but
Yeah.
name. And this is where it's a lot of fun. One more
I think he's
thing.
going to have to claim something. Not everyone's going to accept that, but
Oh yeah, I mean he's gonna have to deal with it. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of backstabbing, and you don't want to trust that Hux. But Thrawn definitely still has the most claim to legitimacy out of anybody really in the Empire at this point to be the commander in chief, head of the
Yeah.
military, maybe even emperor. One more thing I want to bring up for Thrawn before we can move on to the next thing. We'll skip one of those things here. One thing I noticed about Thrawn in the Filoni stuff, and I think it's really prevalent here compared to the books, is Thrawn's kind of lack of loyalty to anybody, right? So, like,
Yeah.
willing to let Balin and Shin die. He's kind of mad. He's kind of upset about Morgan's death, but he's like, waste, but it's a loss. She did her duty.
Yeah.
Like, he only cares about himself and the 3 witches getting off that planet. It's like, everyone else and the cargo and everyone else who's not important, well, see you later, losers. Bye-bye. Compared to, like, when me and Hannah were talking about the original Thrawn 2017, where it's like, he feels kind of friendly with Eli Vanto.
Yeah.
Feels like there's a friendship there. But this Thrawn doesn't feel like he doesn't have any friends and doesn't care for friends. Everyone's just assets or liabilities.
I mean, that's the disconnect between the screen and paper.
Definitely.
Right, which we've gone over. Here's a question for you. Do you feel that Morgan was fridged? And underused?
I can definitely see it. I felt like I kind of wish he could have lived even if she was abandoned on the planet.
Yeah.
I felt like it's like, oh, that's kind of a little sad. I mean, yeah, it's certainly like an odd one for me. I thought he was going to show up, but I would have been interesting, kind of like see maybe like her questions, her loyalty to Thrawn. Like, we just left to abandon her there. I thought Morgan was honestly gonna be the one to kill him in the end, honestly.
Yeah.
But then again, you never know. Maybe she might be secretly alive. Who knows with Filoni work?
Do we have a body? Has it been buried?
That's true. Was there a body? I don't know. I mean,
did she get Mace Windu? I don't know.
Was it a stab wound? Could she survive that? Her hatred kept her alive.
I hope so. I felt she got fridged and underused. I think. Yeah. I'd be really fascinated. Well, first of all, just to get more, because she is such a great character. Dan Inosanto does such a great job, such a great performance in such a prominent role for someone, Filipino American, I believe, and again, just the successor to Bruce Lee and to her father and to everything that has set her up and come before her. For her to be in the spotlight. I'd need more from her. She's such a compelling villain.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip the Mortis stuff a little bit for next week.
We are gonna get to that next week. I'll preview that.
So the final kind of thing is I call New Republic woes. Like the galaxy. It's nice to see Mon Mothma again, especially in the post Andor world. I love that little sense of continuity. It's like see Jevy O'Reilly in Rogue One, then you see her in Andor, and now you're seeing her here in Mandoverse.
Yeah.
Looking very snazzy in her Chancellor garment. Love seeing Hera. Love seeing the fleet. The fleet's beautiful, man. I wish we could have seen Thrawn wreck it a little bit just to kind of show off his skills, but maybe they're saving that for the movie.
I think we will.
Yeah, I better see that fleet in action, man.
Yeah.
And just kind of nice to see Senator Ziono. Like, that's a Resistance callback. It's like, heck yeah, Resistance fans are winning. Playing the board
sort of. I mean, he's a character.
Hey, we get it. We get mentioned. That's all we wish for at this point. That we get acknowledged that we existed once.
Sure.
It's such an underrated show. It needs its love.
Yeah.
that's kind of cool now seeing like, oh, his son's gonna be so different from him. It's like it's so
True.
great.
Yeah. You know,
Love
teenage
love you.
rebellion. You know.
And it's supposed to be like in his 20s, so
Yeah.
not really teenage rebellion at that
You
point.
know,
But
youthful rebellion.
and
Whatever.
Hera and Jason Sindula, it's like, oh, it's so great to see them, and Carson T was back. That was great. Just it was really cool, man. Like this is very much getting at the big kind of core story of what this era is going to be all about. Because as
This
Filoni
guy?
always
You
stated,
mean this guy?
yeah, that guy,
This
that
guy who
guy,
stole the show?
yeah. I
And
was glad to see him,
yeah.
and
Mhm.
yeah, that Filoni always says this whole era is basically like the Imperial Remnant versus the New Republic. This is the showdown. So that was real great.
Yeah. So again, I mean, here's another thing I was really looking forward to seeing is the New Republic story and how they're struggling to form a government and come together, just like Mon Mothma, all the way back to Chuck Wendig's. Please read another Star Wars Chuck Wendig Life Debt. We're forming a government, Leia. We actually have to take responsibility for what we do here, for the infrastructure we build, for the amount we spend on military excursions, right? I mean, that's a big problem in our world today, is how much governments spend on military versus building infrastructure and social services and healthcare and education and transportation and et cetera, et cetera. And here we have this argument from Senator Ziono, but even from Mon Mothma to some extent, to say we have other fish to fry. We can't let Harry. We can't devote these resources on this theory you have. It's also another interesting thing. They aren't willing to trust the Jedi as much. That question I've always had is what we talked about last week. What's the relationship between the Jedi and the Republic? In this, it's there's respect and there's remembering what they've done for the rebellion, what Luke did for the rebellion, and how the Jedi have been guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy. But we need more evidence if we're going to go on this wild bantha chase. and so I understand it. Here was another cold take that didn't come up. People were giving Mon Mothma grief for starting the First Order. That's another cold take, by the way. I don't know if you saw that, but people were all.
Well, that's been going on for years.
Yeah, but we see the confrontation on screen. If anything, it's Ziono. I want to see. Here's another thing that I want to see. I want to see Ziono not coming from a selfish point of view. I want to see him actually saying, "We can't be the Empire," and that's the fascinating thing about even just the ship design. I think Red Leader type of thing he'd bring up is the ship design is quasi imperial. It's Mon Calamari imperial. This weird mashup. Yeah, it's very sleek and very. I mean, you have Venator class Star Destroyer.
The Starhawk. That's what the Starhawk is. It's Star Destroyer.
The Starhawk. But just like how that was looking forward to the Empire, the Venator. Some of these ships start to lean back and look back and say, this real identity crisis that the New Republic is constantly going to be in, of saying, how do we maintain peace and order, the good of peace and order, and making sure people aren't harmed from all the rough folks out there, while also not being the rough folks ourselves. And that's a problem with, we can talk about policing in a democracy generally. It's one that, over the last few years, we've seen police forces repeatedly fail at. And, we talk about divestment. There's the argument, defunding police and divesting police into community resources. But then you do get a situation where Thrawn comes back in this sci-fi fantasy situation where Thrawn potentially coming back. They do have to militarize to some extent. Hera is the one who sees it. Leia is the one who sees it. I'll be curious to see how they end up handling that ultimately. Is to say, folks who generally are, I gather, how can you not be horrified by what happened to George Floyd? And how can you not be horrified by the amount of military spending? Here's the other extreme, I guess, is this thought experiment of here's a radical demilitarization what do you do then once you set up that thought experiment? Well, then
Well,
there's a large scale security threat, and so
but
that
a lot of
arises. I'm really glad we're telling it. It's a fascinating story that we're actually getting. Go ahead.
what a lot of people don't bring up about the demilitarization thing. It wasn't like demilitarized. Mon Mothma's plan was demilitarize the central authority, but prop up the local planetary defense forces.
Which,
Um,
I mean, we see parallels in High Republic, for example, right?
yeah.
I mean, that's a question of when the Jedi are around. That's another problem, that the Jedi just aren't around to actually
doesn't
take
help.
care of these things. Which again, we talked about ad nauseum last week. But
Although it's interesting that I think the New Republic, in a weird way, has more of a military than even the Old Republic did at that time. So
possibly,
there's sort of an interesting thing, but that's kind of more like, well, how deep in the weeds is the story
Yeah.
going to get into? But yeah, it's going to be interesting for sure, and I'm excited to see where this goes. I want to talk about just one more thing, if you don't mind, because I feel like we glossed over it a little bit at the beginning, but I just want to get over this one more thing because I think it deserves its own topic. I just want to talk about Balin. I just want to talk about Balin, Ray Stevenson, R.I.P. Oh my God, I think he was one of the best Star Wars characters, Star Wars villains, like in a long time. Like he just nailed it. He's so fascinating. I wish I knew a bit more of his motivations, but just the way he talks, the way he behaves, the way, well, maybe not his motivation, just like like what exactly does he want in Peridia? Just the way he behaves, like just disillusioned, dark, just disillusioned, not Jedi. Uses the dark side,
creamsicle Jedi. He's the creamsicle Jedi,
but still kind of adheres to the kind of master apprentice relationship with Shin. And he talks about the cycle, and it's like, he's talking about like how Sabine and Ezra are like, I forgot what he called them, something Jedi, like Jedi
Boken.
born, but
Boken Jedi.
Boken Jedi, temple Jedi trained the temple without the temple, and it's all so fascinating. And Ray Stevenson just A+. This is, and if they got to recast, I'm not against recast on principle, but this is why I always say when people say, "Oh, recasting is easy," no, it's not. You can't it's not that easy.
Huge shoes to fill. Oh my
Huge
word.
shoot to fill, and it's like so much of Balin's performance for me is what sold me on the character, probably even more than the writing, quite frankly.
I mean, Ray Stevens' performance.
Ray Stevens' performance sold me on that character even more than the writing itself. So yeah, you could do a whole theology time on this guy. So
I mean, you don't even know. We don't even know if he's a villain, really. I mean,
Ray wants to do something extreme. It seems like something like.
But Ray Stevenson, he had us buy into this character so much, and feel so much for him and for his story, especially given, I mean, the prevalence of Order 66 and not just Order 66, but even Ahsoka's trial and how the Jedi let her down and she leaves again Order 66, and what do you do now? And that question that has so many different moral answers. What does a Jedi do when the Order doesn't exist anymore? He even wears Clone Wars Zero armor somewhat, right?
Yeah.
And we do see, of course, with Anakin in the Clone Wars, and so all these, he's just he's another bit of the thread connecting this show together in both its thematic and production content. And I want to, he said he knew Anakin, another character who knew Anakin and respected him, and it seems like his take on the Jedi is actually quite nuanced. Well, it is. It doesn't seem like it. Talked about how he misses the idea of the Order, right? A villain won't necessarily do that. A villain we expect our villains to despise the idea of the Order. Instead, he misses the idea of the Order and probably despises the way it failed to live up to that idea, or was never able to. Again, it's almost sounding like Qui-Gon here, even though there's no chance Qui-Gon would be as evil as him, as violent as him. yeah, I mean, again, what's he up to? What does he want? What does he hope for? Qui-Gon would never want to consolidate power, his own power that way. Um, whether, especially cosmic power, he'd be very wary of his own influence in that sense. But
He wouldn't be seeking out Mortis the way this guy is.
he wouldn't be seeking out Mortis for the same reason. He might be
Right.
seeking out Mortis for. I mean, he seeks out the ability to become a force ghost, right?
Right.
But in order to support and seek life in the next generation, for those outside of himself. Whereas, yeah, I mean, Balin, but what if Balin has some sort of mixed? I mean, that's the thing why we're drawn to villains, why we're drawn to the idea of gray Jedi,
I wouldn't
creamsicle
even call him a
Jedi.
great Jedi. I don't.
No, but
He
why
is
we're
no Jedi.
drawn? No, there's no such thing as gray Jedi, right? I mean,
Right.
gray. We've been over this. There's no such thing as
Right.
creamsicle Jedi. They're going to be drawn to the dark side. There's the tinge of red is going to overtake the saber, metaphorically speaking. But there are these layers of motivation for him that would be really important to explore, and I really hope we're able to do that somehow.
Mhm.
I think I think maybe the best solution is, I don't know, for Shin to just walk in his footsteps and discover these things for herself on her own, and maybe that brings her back to Ahsoka and Sabine somehow, and that could be her way forward. That maybe Ray Stevenson dying, tragically, pushes Shin towards the light in a way. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing is, again, we'll go into this more next week. The father and the son are there, just they're in the statues. The daughter is everywhere. The daughter is able to flit and fly as Morai everywhere, and so
Stars in a little bit of Ahsoka too. She's in a little
yeah,
bit.
the daughter, it's okay, and these three female characters maybe being able to overcome Shin, maybe able to overcome whatever hatred was trained in her, even using Balin's lessons. And yeah, I think there are ways of carrying on Balin's legacy, Balin's influence, even without him being there. That is a possibility. I
Oh
think
yeah.
recasting or something is, I don't know what this is tricky with everything, with the strike and everything. What, the Leia Tarkin thing, now that the technology is so much better, um, what that might be allowed to do. But yeah, there are ways, there are different ways, different things they can do.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to tell him what to do. I'm not in those rooms. I don't know what Filoni wanted originally. I'm sure he has plans for Balin and Shin,
Yeah,
and
and able to pivot with those plans.
yeah. I
Yeah.
That's why I get the sense that Ahsoka season 2 hasn't even been written yet, even though there was a plan for probably a plan for season 2.
Yeah.
Like, so it's not like it's locked in. I get like, so I don't think Filoni's like, oh, I gotta rewrite the whole thing from scratch. I don't think he's even gotten to page
No.
1 yet of season 2. But yeah, that is, it's sad, but it's because
It is.
Balin just was such a good character.
And Ray
Um,
Stevenson seemed like such a great person.
oh, he was. Oh yeah, he's great, and that performance is just magnificent. And
Yeah.
just like,
An actual good guy, apparently. I don't know.
oh yeah, great person. And like, again, I just love the views of the Jedi in this whole show,
Yeah.
where even Thrawn's got a view, like a very kind of utilitarian view of, like, he's almost like watching history unfold, and he's just kind of observing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be very interesting to see what they do. But yeah, that's kind of it as we wrap up, the future of the Mandoverse. I think Ahsoka, in terms of like looking at Mandoverse as kind of one singular thing, like almost like if you put all the arcs together, it's like Clone Wars, New Republic Wars. This is kind of the start of the new chapter. Thrawn's back. I'm going, even the way Mando season 3 ends, it's kind of setting up, Din and Grogu are gonna go start hunting down
Yeah.
Imperials, and then realize, oh shoot, the biggest, baddest Imperial is back in town.
Yeah.
Run. I don't know what Skeleton Crew's gonna do. I've heard maybe it's more independent of all this than.
I mean, do we think Mandalorian's going to be about Imperials, or is it going to be more about bounties and kind of low lives and whatnot?
No, I mean, remember at the end, Din's like, "Hey, Carson Tifa,
True. There's this
here's
guy.
my card."
This guy, most important character in the Mandoverse, right here.
He's the Phil Coulson
Patrono.
of the Mandoverse.
He is.
Well, no, be worried about that. Remember what happened to Phil Coulson?
It's fine.
Yeah. But yeah, you remember, Din's like, "Here's my card."
There's also Ming-Na-Wen.
That's true. But it's like, so my guess is like Din's gonna start hunting Imperials for Carson's like, hey,
Yeah.
some Imperial integrity going on, and then it's just a rabbit hole of, oh shoot, we got into a big conspiracy here. Run, call the Jedi, help.
And Carson, we see Carson in this show. Carson's again amazing in this show.
Oh yeah.
Paul.
Although
he believes in the Shadow Council. He believes it exists.
Right. Believes something's out there.
Yeah.
In terms of like what a season 2 would bring, I think I'm curious how much hopping some of these characters will continue to do. Again, I think the Book of Boba Fett situation was a flub.
Yeah.
I think there's a bit more. Ahsoka deals with this. Mando kind of deals with this. Yeah, sometimes characters will hop in, but for the most part, Ahsoka's going to be focusing more on this. So I do think the Thrawn stuff might come more in season 2. I do wonder if we'll get kind of a regular Galaxy Peridia storyline, hop back and forth. There's even things about, Filoni's artwork has hinted at things in Ahsoka, which is true, very true.
Yeah.
Like Sabine and Ahsoka in the snow, but probably Peridia now. Yeah, it's very interesting to see what Thrawn's plan is. Like, is it just simply? Are you frozen?
I hope not.
He frozen.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands.
I can hear you.
It'd be very interesting just to kind of see who the bad guys and what the grander narrative of all this is when we get to the movie, because is it just Thrawn gets the Imperial fleet together and like, let's go, boys, let's go attacking Coruscant? Is, I don't know, wild theory that could easily become a cold take. Is the sun gonna resurrect himself, and is he gonna be like the real bad guy of this all? I don't know. Like, what is our
Sam
force?
Witwer come back?
I mean, hey, he could probably do it. He's done live action before. But what is the relationship, especially between an Ahsoka season 2 and this Filoni film, especially? That's kind of the two in my mind that it's like, because it's like, look at Love and like, I guess, Loki season 2 that took almost a year or two to get on. That's a great show, by the way. But it's sort of like, will Ahsoka season 2 happen after the movie? Before? I think more before myself, because I feel like
it's got to be before. There's more setup to do. Yeah,
I feel like there's more setup to do. I think you need more Thrawn. Like, I feel like if it's just Thrawn in this movie and he died, it's like, can't do really that much with him.
We need another season. We got 2 seasons of him in Rebels, which broke the pattern. Thankfully, we got plenty of Thrawn. Whereas in season 1, what is the Inquisitor? In season 2 is Vader. In season 3 and 4 is Thrawn.
Well, Thrawn just escaped. He hasn't even done much. He hasn't even done anything big. So it's like, I kind of also wonder, like, because Filoni is also very much more that Forcey story. So like, what is Thrawn? Is Thrawn the true threat? Like right now, I feel like we have like 2 antagonists in Baylan and Thrawn. Baylan now is who knows, because he's passed. Are we going to replace are we going to have like dual protagonists of antagonists? I mean, there's
the Ahsoka, like you were saying, hopping between galaxies, like Peridia. So you have Ahsoka and Sabine, you have Hera and Ezra.
I just wonder what's set up for happens in season 2 will affect the movie, and will Ahsoka and even be back for the movie? Like,
she's got to be the main character of the movie. She's got to be the protagonist. I think.
I'm leaning towards Sabine myself at this moment, but
interesting. I mean, I'll say all of them together. But she's going to be a prominent place in it. She got to have a prominent place in it.
I can only imagine.
It's a Filoni movie.
But I'm like, it's like, are we almost like have like the militaristic and the spiritual villain, and they're kind of, but how do they organize with one each other? That's I'm very curious. Like, it's just more speculation all up in the air.
I mean,
obviously.
who? Well, here's a question: who is going to be the main villain, if you will, in season 4 of Mando? Right. That's the and is it going to be probably someone Hux, or someone around the Imperial Remnant now that Gideon's gone? In the shadows, maybe that's setting up a Thrawn Hux rivalry of some sort,
That'd be
and
fun.
Hux wins out
Snoke.
because I mean there's that guy in the background. What I'm curious about then, this raises my big curiosity, is how well do Ahsoka and Mandalorian connect with each other, and of course Skeleton Crew in there. How well does this crossover hold together, and how well are these shows able to be integral stories on their own? All that we talked about, the challenge, we talked about it in this podcast, in this episode, of maintaining, letting Rebels be its own show and letting Ahsoka be its own show, while also continuing Clone Wars, continuing Rebels, building on what we know. That's what we call diachronic, as in through time. This is synchronic, letting Ahsoka and the Mandalorian be their own shows, while also tying into each other, connected to each other. It can go in. It's a very fine balance. It's a tightrope, right? It can go just like just like Rebels and Clone Wars could be a tightrope. Rebels, sorry, and Ahsoka. Ahsoka balanced the tightrope perfectly in being a continuation and a new thing.
Not the well.
I say would, but my point being, Mando and Ahsoka, are they gonna? It's a tightrope of them being their own show and connecting it together, and it feeling the story making sense, the stories together meshing together making sense, and not being like, wait a minute, hold on, what that like they don't even talk to each other, don't think, and that's kind of like 90s TV would do that, or comic books would do that. So I don't think that's gonna be a problem, but it's still a challenge for Favreau and Filoni to grapple with, is how these two shows are going to relate to each other, and have their own identity.
Right. I mean, I do think. I mean, if you like the Marvels and thought the Marvels succeeded in getting WandaVision and and Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel all together and not needing to watch any of it to understand, then
True.
It can be done. I agree. I think I do wonder. I am very curious when season 4 comes around how much of season 4 of Mando is its own thing, like getting Grogu kind of doing their own thing, and maybe like Carson Teva going like, "Hey, I had a bit of trouble with Harrison Jula earlier a couple months ago.
Yeah.
We got to do. I need your help," but not necessarily like. And here's an adventure with Ezra that continues his storyline in the same way kind of Book of Boba Fett flubbed that one.
I mean, the closer parallel would be Arrowverse, right? The Arrow and is it Green Arrow and the Flash? That's the show. How well those two mesh together, and that DC thing that they tried, and apparently they did really well. They were able to line up really well and be their own shows. So it definitely can be done for sure. It's never been done in Star Wars before, and so it's been doing amazingly. Charles Soule is doing a brilliant job in the comics of holding everything together, while all these comics have especially with Dark Droids. It's never been done in Star Wars television before, and so obviously it hasn't been. Pardon?
Well, it's being done now, so
it's being done now, or it's about to be done soon. Especially given that Ahsoka is that much more significant than Book of Boba Fett, for example.
Oh yeah, I mean, as I said before, Ahsoka is pretty much its own identity, and Book of Boba Fett just became Mando 2.5.
Yeah.
I think a lot of this will come down, honestly, not to the TV shows. I think a lot of this will come down to how the movie's executed.
Yeah.
And
it ties everything together.
Yeah, and how much that also stands alone. Because let's face it, there'll be a lot of people who are going to watch that movie and not have seen an episode of Disney Plus. Same with like Miss Marvel. Like probably more people interested in Miss Marvel through the film.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least I like to hope so. Because that's just how it works. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see. I'm excited. And next year, 2024, hopefully we'll get a dark space wizard show and some kids in space.
Yes.
So I'm excited.
And shoot, I just realized, yeah, there could be a show that could top Ahsoka for me.
I'm excited for
Acolyte. In the High Republic. I mean, come on, like.
Well, actually, I'll just say one more thing, and then we'll truly wrap up.
Yeah.
Is the thing about Acolyte and Ahsoka for me even more than say Andor, which I love. You know me, we love Andor. Is these shows, Acolyte and Ahsoka, are what I call future of Star Wars, and what I mean by the future of Star Wars is I love Andor. Don't get me wrong, I love Andor. What Andor still got is a little bit more boxed in terms of like where it can really go. Like,
True.
It really only got to go to Rogue One. Ahsoka. Even though obviously I do think Thrawn's going to be defeated, and we'll have our little tie-in to the sequel trilogy and the First Order, blah blah blah. Is they could be setting up plot points or have ideas for plot points that can go beyond Episode 9. Even
true,
they can go beyond.
We think they are. I mean, everything with Rey and her Jedi Academy,
right? Even if there's anyone show up in her Jedi Academy, like those things can appear. And Acolyte,
not so much. I just want to. What I mean there is not so much necessarily actual characters, but ideas of what the Jedi are. Could be going forward. But anyway, so go ahead.
And Acolyte, even being still 100 years in the past, much like the High Republic itself, we're gonna get to the prequels eventually, but 100 years is a long time for adventures. Like, there's still lots of stuff to talk about and adventures to have. So I think Acolyte's very much a future of Star Wars in terms of like, here's a brand new era. Here's what the Jedi at their prime were. And here's all the adventures that you can have before we get to Phantom Menace.
Joel, you're hyping the show up to me too much, right? I mean, everything I love about the High Republic and why it's my favorite thing in Star Wars is because it's looking at the space wizards in a time where they can do anything they want. They can tell whatever. I mean, yes, they're telling the historical benchmark of how they get to Order 66. But the way they're doing it, they have so much freedom to explore how and why that is. And the Acolyte's going to continue everything that makes the High Republic great. At least I hope it is. And I mean, and everything we've heard from Leslie Hillman suggests it will. So, oh my, I can't even say Acolyte on the podcast. That's exciting. Oh man, I know about that show. When's that show coming in?
Hopefully next year. But yeah, that's why I call them the future of Star Wars, because there's a lot more freedom to be had. I mean, I'm sure Skeleton Crew has freedom in its own sense of like, here's some kids in space and they're gonna do cool stuff. Yeah. But it's still kind of part of the Mandoverse, and who knows how if they'll get to season 2. I think both Acolyte will get a season 2. I've heard it probably guaranteed.
Interesting. They have probably like you're saying, they have the room, they have the time.
They got the time. So yeah. But that I think is all. We probably didn't cover everything I wanted because we've been pulling it in. And there's so much more to cover. It's Ahsoka, but we'll be talking about the show forever.
That is true. That is very true. As we had hoped. I mean, if we were able to talk about if the studios were able to treat the actor, well, they were able to, if we're willing to treat the actors properly and pay them properly and pay the writers properly while this show was going on, we would have talked about it even more and plenty, and we still will continue. It's still going to give us things to talk about. That's probably why tonight it's been probably one of the most fluid and engaging conversations I've felt in a bit. Not the previous episodes were bad, but even more so because this show just gives us everything we do here at the Eye on Canon to dive into and delve into. I will say though, if you're looking for episode by episode breakdowns, Thursday nights right here on the Star Wars Underworld channel, 9 p.m. The Underworld podcast, the flagship. They're back. They're doing 2 episodes at a time, I believe, except for I think episode 5 they're doing on their own. But this guy Dominic, you can check him out. He's all right. He does all right. He gives his moderate takes on that show as well. So there we go. For now, thanks for joining us, everyone, and checking us out. Check us out at the Iron Cannon podcast. Again, if you come here because you saw the flagship or you saw on Discord or whatnot, welcome to the Iron Cannon podcast. Normally we dive into kind of just broader intellectual conversations about what is Star Wars and what is happening, or we talk about High Republic, and we talk about the comics as I did off the top, and talk about different novels that have come out and different news bits about those things as well. But yeah, here whenever there's a show whenever those Canon TV shows, because Ahsoka's Canon, guys. We talked
Yes.
about those two. Now that the strike is over, and hopefully there's a deal that the actors and writers can all live with for now. Yeah, we can talk about that. Let us know what you thought about Ahsoka, about our conversation, about the topics that we delved into. The comments are there on Underworld YouTube, Underworld Facebook, Underworld Twitch, Iron Cannon Twitch, Iron Cannon Twitter, Underworld Twitter, and of course in the Discord. Let us know. I mean, I'm sure the conversation there is roaring, was raging, and has been for. That's another thing. We have actually been talking about Ahsoka behind the closed doors, the non-studio promoting closed doors of the Discord server. So check that out as well. Yeah, give us a like and subscribe and a follow. You can follow us first of all also on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Cannon Pod. Gonna get back more into Threads a little more. Not that we're going away from Twitter, but I'm gonna give Threads some more attention. And of course, the Underworld YouTube Facebook page as well. Joel, where can they find you on the internet?
Find me at JD2021. Again, JD2021, always spitting them hot incendiary takes. I hold no bars back. You can, follow me at the Ion Cannon Pod, at the Ion Cannon Pod. I might get back into that too. Just maybe start doing some threads if I have thoughts on my head. But obviously you can follow me on the Discord, the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we talk about all things Star Wars and more. It's been a lot of fun, and I know it's not the new year just yet, but I feel like if Ahsoka was going to be our apex thing for this year, ooh, we're finally we're getting closer, Master, to Acolyte, and that's going to be that's been what we've been waiting for. We've been training for this moment.
It's true. We have. I will say, Eye of the Storm or Eye of Darkness.
Oh yeah,
Apparently
really
that
good.
could also blow things out of the water too, from what I've heard. So definitely reading that. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at NUG485, Instagram and Threads at MNEUG1138. Of course, at Iron Cannon Pod, EYEONCANONPOD. You can also get all of our podcasts on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, audio only. Tractor Beam, I do need to go back and upload all the Tractor Beam episodes onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Haven't quite done that. I think maybe make an independent feed for that. Stay tuned for that as well. Yeah, and join me by myself, flying solo on the Tractor Beam this Thursday at 12:15 p.m. Eastern, 9:15 a.m. Pacific. I'm gonna do my best to keep the ball rolling there, and yeah, enjoy the comics commentary. Again, Chris and I have definitely been going strong over there as well. Yeah, again, I'm also in the Discord, so give me a shout if you want there. Next week, as we've promised, as we've suggested, as we've said, we're talking about Mortis, talking about what Mortis is, what it might mean in Ahsoka, what those statues, what's happening with the statues and the lack of statue there. But also going back into that Clone Wars episode, those Clone Wars episodes, and how that relates to the prophecy of the Chosen One, among other things. So many things you can talk about, World Between Worlds, etc., etc. Joel, I know you're gonna cook up something great for the notes, and then we will put it all together for you next Monday night, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.